All right, let's dive into one of the biggest questions in all of history. Why did some societies end up with huge empires, steel, and guns, while others didn't? The answer is probably not what you think. It's less about human genius and way more about just the luck of the biological draw. I mean, think about that for a second. What if the fate of empires was decided by the taste of a wild almond? It sounds totally nuts, right? But what if it's true? See, wild almonds, they're loaded with cyanide. They're deadly. But imagine, thousands of years ago, a single genetic mutation creates a tree that isn't poisonous. Our ancestors stumble upon it, taste it, and realize it's safe. So they plant its seeds. And with that simple act, they weren't just making a snack. Oh no, they were kicking off a process that would literally reshape the entire planet. So that brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer. The idea is that the specific plants and animals that were just there in a region and their unique genetic quirks, well, they set the stage for everything that came next. Seriously. It decided who became farmers, who built the first cities, and, yeah, ultimately, who conquered whom. It's a history that was basically written in DNA. Okay, so where do we even begin with this story? Well, first, let's get one thing straight. Agriculture was not some sudden invention. There wasn't some genius who just woke up one morning and said, hey, I'm going to be a farmer. It was this incredibly slow, drawn-out process of discovery and, well, subtle manipulation that took generations. For where literally thousands of years, humans were in this kind of in-between stage. It's called proto-agriculture. They were still hunter-gatherers, but they were starting to, learn the rules of the game. They'd figure out that if they cleared away some weeds, their favorite plants grew better. Or hey, if you replant a piece of that yam, a whole new one grows. It was like humanity's long apprenticeship with Mother Nature. And as they did this, they basically became, well, you could call them editors of nature. They started making choices. Now, some of these choices were totally conscious, right? Let's replant the seeds from the biggest, tastiest fruit. Makes sense. But, and this is the crazy part, some of the most important choices they made were completely unconscious. They were just doing what was easiest. Just take a look at corn. Its wild ancestor, a plant called teosint, is this scrawny little grass with a few tiny rock-hard kernels. I mean, it's barely food. But over thousands of years, just by people picking and replanting the biggest and best seeds, it was transformed into the corn on the cob we know today. This wasn't just a little change. It was a complete reinvention of a plant from the ground up. And this idea of unconscious selection is just so cool. Take wild wheat. It's got this brilliant built-in survival trick. When the grains are ripe, the stalk literally shatters and throws the seeds everywhere. Great for the wheat, bad for a hungry human. But every once in a while, a random mutation would cause some stalks not to shatter. Now, if you're an early human trying to gather food, which stalks are you going to bring back to your camp? The ones that fell apart or the ones that stayed intact? The mutants, of course. You didn't even have to think about it. It's the exact same simple logic with peas. Wild pea pods, they literally explode to scatter their seeds. But once in a blue moon, a mutant pod wouldn't explode. So naturally, those are the ones people could actually gather and take home. And by replanting the seeds from those pods, they accidentally selected for this non-exploding trait. Before you know it, generations later, they've created a domesticated pea that just waits patiently to be picked. And when you look at the timeline of when we domesticated different plants, you see it wasn't random at all. It was completely logical. We started with the easy stuff, way back around 10,000 BCE. Grains like wheat and barley that grow fast and just needed a few genetic tweaks. It was way later that we figured out fruit trees, which take years to grow. And then dead last, the really tough ones, like strawberries, which needed some pretty advanced tricks to even get them to grow. So that's the plant story. But when we turn to the animal kingdom, oh boy, the domestication lottery gets even more intense. And let me tell you, there were a lot fewer winning tickets. Okay, get this number in your head. 148. That's how many large, wild, plant-eating mammal species have existed on this planet. These were the candidates, right? They're potential partners we had for building civilization. Yeah, 148. I mean, think about it. That's 148 different species that could have, potentially, been domesticated for food, for work, for travel. Sounds like a pretty big pool of applicants, right? Well, the audition process was absolutely brutal. So out of all those 148 candidates, how many do you think actually made the cut? How many were successfully domesticated in all of human history? The number is just 14. 14. I mean, why the massive drop-off?
What happened to the other 134 species? Why did they all fail the audition? Well, it turns out to be a good candidate for domestication, an animal had to pass a super strict 6-point checklist. And if you failed even one of these points, you were out, disqualified.
Okay, so here's the checklist. First, you can't be a picky eater. Eating grass? Good. Eating only, say, eucalyptus leaves like a koala? That's a fail. You have to grow up fast. You have to be willing to, breed in captivity. You need a pretty calm personality, not too mean. And this one's crucial. You need the right kind of social life. You have to live in herds with a clear leader so humans can just step in and take over that top spot. And finally, you can't be the type to panic and run headfirst into a fence.
The perfect example of this? The zebra. I mean, people have tried for centuries to domesticate them, and it just never works. But why? They look just like horses. Well, they've failed the checklist. They've got a nasty bite, they panic way too easily, and their social structure just doesn't work for us. The horse, its very close relative, just happened to have the right genes to tick every single one of those 6 boxes. It was pure, dumb, biological luck.
Okay, so now we get to the big payoff. We've got our domesticated plants, we've got our tiny handful of domesticated animals. It's time to connect the dots. How did this totally unequal distribution of biological wealth end up forging the empires of history? This is really the core of the whole argument. The main crop a civilization grew basically became the blueprint for that entire society. Think about it. In Europe, wheat farming meant you had to rotate fields, which led to certain land patterns and, moderate populations. Over in Asia, rice paddies could be farmed on the same land, over and over. That supported these incredibly dense populations and required massive state-run projects. But in the Americas, something really unique happened with maize.
Yeah, as the historian Fernand Braudel put it, maize was just a wonder crop. It grew so much food with so little work. And that didn't just feed people, it freed people. All that extra labor, all those free hands, could be put to work by the state to build those massive pyramids and cities of the Aztec and Maya. The crop literally built the empire.
And if you think that's a big deal, the impact of the animals was even more dramatic. In Eurasia, you had horses for war, oxen for plows, and a whole bunch of other useful animals. Living so close to them also gave Eurasians a really grim advantage: immunity to diseases like smallpox that jumped from cattle to humans. The Americas? They had none of that. No horses, no plows, which meant farming by hand. And most critically, no immunity to the terrible diseases the Europeans brought with them. This biological imbalance was an absolutely decisive factor in what happened next. So, when you pull all these different threads together, the picture that emerges is, well, it's startlingly clear. The story of human civilization isn't just a story about kings and battles and big ideas. It's a biological story. And the ultimate takeaway is really this. The hand a society was dealt from nature's deck, the specific plants and animals they happened to have in their backyard, had a massive, lasting impact on their destiny. Geography wasn't just the stage where history happened. Its biology was one of the main actors. And that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. For almost all of human history, we were at the mercy of this genetic lottery. But today, with things like genetic engineering and AI, we're starting to write our own biological and technological codes. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the powerful, unseen forces that are shaping our future right now?